Start, if that's okay. We're about ready to record. Morning, colleagues, and welcome to the first new committee of the Human Resources Committee. Welcome a number of colleagues who sat on this committee before. Myself, I'm new to the committee, and Councillor Lee is new to the committee. Have we had any apologies, Catherine?
None that I can retrieve at the moment, if we have.
None. Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest, have we got any? No. Can we look at the minutes of the last meeting, please? First of all, matters of accuracy?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Any matters arising? Can we take them as agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, thank you, colleagues. We'll move on to item 4, which is the Human Resources Update. That's Tracy.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. For new members of the committee, this is an update that we bring to each of the meetings. So it's a quarterly report, and it looks at key HR metrics for the period. Because of the way sometimes the committee dates align with the end of the quarterly period, some of this time the periods are a little bit out of kilter. So for some of the metrics this time round, the period is 1st of April to 31st of May rather than the 30th of June, because obviously the committee meeting doesn't go to the end of the month. And absence data, because it's done retrospectively, that reporting period is the 1st of January to the 31st of March. So it's the last period of the financial year. So just to put in context where these numbers are coming from. So what we do with the HR metrics is we look at mainly things like staffing numbers and absence. We also bring in other elements as part of the review, but these will chiefly be the figures that members will be looking at. So if we take staffing numbers first, the table under 2.1 just summarises where we are in terms of approved posts and actual. So actual is actually people who are in post. Just to explain the grouping, so whole-time and on-call employees obviously are from the operational side of the service, and support staff are those that provide I suppose the infrastructure support, the professional, the technical, the administrative roles, which are mainly based here but may also be based out on stations, and sometimes also are within the frontline departments like prevention and protection. So it does cover quite a wide range of staff. So the report sets out the numbers of leavers and starters that we've had in that period. We've actually got a workforce figure as at 31st of May at 807, so 807 staff. And we do, it references there 73 dual contractors. So just for those people who don't understand that term, that they are whole-time firefighters who also provide on-call cover. So when they are not providing whole-time cover on shift, they make themselves available to provide on-call cover. So that's what we mean by that. Under 2.4, you'll see we had 11 new whole-time starters. That's mainly to do with a new cohort of apprentice firefighters who joined the service in April. So they're currently going through their trainee course up at SDC, Service Development Centre, and they will be coming out, I think, into service and being posted about July, August time, I think I'm right in saying that. And then we will have a new cohort, another cohort of trainees starting in September. So although you will see that the whole time figure there, the variance figure is minus 18, actually there are plans in place to be bringing people into the service during the course of this year, which we did report to, I think, at the last committee. And we will also be looking at other ways that we might be able to do that during the course of the year. So, for instance, sometimes we may transfer firefighters from other fire and rescue services into the service to help with ridership numbers. So that is staffing numbers. If we move on to sickness absence for quarter 4, although we break this down into the different workforce groups, there's been a decrease against all of the groups in the last quarter, which is a good thing to see, and also a decrease compared to the same quarter of last year. So what we do is we look at, okay, what was it last year, what is it this year, because it's a good benchmark to tell us whether the figures are getting better. So both of those figures show a downturn in the last quarter. I have included in there absence related to COVID because up to, well, all through probably the last 2 years when we've reported to committee, we've shown the figures as with COVID and without COVID because COVID made so much difference to our absence figures, but because they're going down now quite significantly, we are including them in the total absence figures. But I've put the figure in there so that you can see actually in that period that we are still seeing absence related to COVID. So we will carry on reporting it where it's significant. Also within the absence figures you will see that long-term absence does equate to quite a significant proportion of all absence across the work groups, and long-term absence means people who are absent due to sickness because they've also got a GP fit note, medical record, and long-term refers to people who've been more than 28 days. So quite significant medical conditions, obviously, if people are away from work for that length of time. And we obviously, as we've stated before, put a lot of support in for people who are absent on a long-term basis. From paragraph 2.18, we look at the whole year review, and again saw a decrease compared to the previous year of about 11.5%, and that was across all work groups. So again, quite a good thing to be able to report. In the whole year, long-term absence accounted for 61% of absence, so quite a significant element of the absence that we're seeing. Paragraph 2.22 looks at national absence trends. So we do contribute to a national fire sector survey, absence survey, every quarter. And what it does is allow us to benchmark ourselves against other fire and rescue services in the sector. I mean, I think we have to bear in mind not all fire and rescue services are the same. You know, we are all a little bit different, but it does give us that comparator. What that is telling us for the last year is that for whole-time staff, our absence figure is below the sector sickness average. So that is 11.43 and our average is 9.75. So that is quite a bit lower than the national average. On-call is just above the national average, as you will see under 2.26, and support staff is also above the national average for last year. Other workforce metrics under 2.29, nothing really significant to report, although we've said there that the grievance, discipline and harassment investigations haven't been completed in the period. There are one or two that have commenced, and so we'll be reporting on those when they're completed. And equally, I think for the last few meetings we've been reporting on an employment tribunal claim that was lodged and was due to be heard next year, but that has now been settled. So that's just a summary, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Colleagues, anyone got any questions or points like to ask?
Yeah, it's very good to see the decrease in absence.
Yes.
And I would like to know what exactly did we do to bring it down, to have a decrease we have now?
Well, as you know, we have our occupational health team, which is on site. It's a dedicated health team. So if somebody does move into long-term absence, or if they are absent because of things which are more like mental health issues, like stressing, we do bring them into the system quite quickly. Okay. So we do referrals to our occupational health team, of which we do have an occupational health consultant as part of that team. So we seek to get the support that people need, really, to try and get them back as quickly as we can, bearing in mind, obviously, it depends on the nature of the illness. We do keep in contact with people throughout that time just to check in that they are still okay. In some cases, we will offer for support like counselling, if that is what people might need. We offer physiotherapy. We have a fitness advisor who can work with people with musculoskeletal injury and help them to rehabilitate after injury and come back into the service. So we have quite a range of things that we can do to support people, and I'd like to think that's one of the reasons that we are getting people back into the workplace.
Yeah, good. That's a very good progress. We've really made a good progress.
Yes.
So we should keep it up.
Yes. I hope so, yeah.
Thanks, Patience. Any of the colleagues have any questions or anything you want to ask? Could I ask a couple of things from Tracy? Because obviously I'm new to the committee. In terms of, if we look on page 10, and we're looking at 2.1, obviously we've got, in terms of whole-time staffing, we're down 18.7 FTE. Is that something we're looking to address or that's going to be addressed?
Yes, so we have another course of 12 starting in September. So they will what we call apprentice firefighters.
Yeah.
So they work through the apprentice firefighter programme over a period of about 2.5 years before they can become competent. So that was part of the recruitment we did last year. So it takes a little bit of time to get people through the system and into the course. So we've had a course that started in April. We'll have a course almost straight on the back of that in September. We've also taken a decision that we will be going out for another whole-time recruitment campaign early 2024. So starting to do some positive action from here on in around, obviously getting applications and making that cohort more diverse where we can. And we've also spoken as well recently in the last couple of weeks opening up the transfer process to bring in people who are already competent at firefighter to watch manager level. So those are the sorts of things. I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
No, I just I think the number is quite significant at the moment. It has implications on the ridership, so we are addressing that. We've got a working group that Tracy mentioned where we've looked at options around how we can increase that in the immediate term but also the longer term. So we're looking at quite a large intake of full-time firefighters next year, so a real opportunity to both influence our workforce figures and the demographics within the workforce as well. So we're looking at up to about 50 people coming in next year. So it's certainly on the radar and one of our risks in terms of making sure we increase that establishment figure.
Thanks, Candida.
Yeah, just to remind members that one of the reasons that we are operating below establishment at the moment was that conscious decision last year while we were trying to balance the budget and looking at potential savings that might need to be made that would have resulted in a lower establishment. So that was helping us manage that situation, but now we're left with the legacy of it. But as described, are absolutely on top of getting that up to full establishment.
Thanks. I'm also saying here, Tracy, that obviously it's good news that absence on call, although it's above average, has decreased by 15%, isn't it? In terms of our recording sickness, I was wondering, and forgive me from a layman's point of view here, obviously you've got people who are off sick due to illnesses, etc. How do we differentiate or record work-related illnesses or stress or injuries?
We do. We do record work-related absence. So we're able to report into the national survey on that as well.
Right.
It's quite. I haven't put it in this actual report because it's quite low. But yes, we do report on that.
It might be interesting for members because when we're talking about long-term absence, somebody may have been injured in the line of duty or something connected to it. I know sometimes it can be difficult, I imagine, to differentiate. Somebody says they're off of work-related stress, for example, but it might be interesting to see those statistics as comparison to the usual ailments, if colleagues are all right with that.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of support staff, I've seen that in other documents we talked about earlier on. Obviously, their sickness is slightly above the national average, and we've had some issues in terms of staff turnover. Is there anything we should be worried about there?
I think if you look at Appendix C, it does set out on there the main reasons for absence. So we do look at reasons that the sort of top 10 reasons why people are absent due to sickness. So that this particular one is for Q4. But what we do find amongst all the groups of staff really is the top 2 reasons that people are due to mental health or due to musculoskeletal injury. So we do particularly focus on those areas in terms of trying to support people and prevent, actually. I mean, the main thing is to prevent these things happening in the first place, particularly with mental health. So we are making a really concerted effort, and I think you'll see in a later report about wellbeing, to raise the profile of where people can find information, can find support about mental health particularly, because what you do tend to find is when people do go off with a mental health issue, it tends to be more long-term in nature. It takes us longer in terms of getting them back and rehabilitating them back into the workplace. But you can see sort of in terms of numbers there that there were 8 staff, and that will vary. So people will come back in that period as well. So they're not all going to be off for the entire period. So we do get people obviously returning to work, and we, in terms of mental health, obviously we would support people by, for instance, allowing them to do modified duties, reduced hours for a little while, until they feel that they can come back to their normal role.
Okay.
So those are the sorts of things that we would do. But we do keep a very close eye on it. We do have a sickness review group that meets every 6 weeks. We have a long-term sickness case review group that meets every month. So we do go through all of the individual cases to see where we can do something if we can. Yeah.
Thank you. Are we all satisfied with that, colleagues? Sorry.
So I was just
Tom.
asking, I think that's all right. Was I think this is a great report, and I've always admired the thoroughness and the detail, because it's certainly worlds apart from the stuff we get from particularly the county council and the district council. I think we're relating to sickness and breaking it down. But I suppose something that always intrigues me, and I suppose I've waited for a few meetings to ask this question, but what do Warwickshire, let's say, do differently to us in relation to some of their stats? And I appreciate I'm picking one that's extremely low.
Yeah.
Are they playing with the figures in some sort of way, or what's? Because it strikes me as that we're a very good organisation.
Yeah. Yes.
Why are they considerably lower than us in some of these metrics?
I think it depends on the service. So on some of these
County services.
Yes, and you will have quite small numbers of staff as well. So each service is that little bit different. I think particularly when COVID was at its height, we always reported our COVID figures, and we still do in our stats, where many other fire and rescue services don't. So I think until we get over that COVID, where people are still reporting sickness, we might see a disparity that might be linked to that. I think increasingly it will reduce, but certainly at the height it was quite significant.
Well, yeah, I mean, none of these figures kind of raise alarm bells for me, because it's clear to me that we sit pretty much in
the middle.
I mean, the average line doesn't mean much to me. I mean, it's the median that's important to me, and that's kind of where we sit if you did the basic maths, I suppose. But yeah, it did strike me as odd. But I don't normally kick off with the book, but it does seem to me that there's probably some disparity of how things are being measured.
Yeah, I mean, it's a national survey, so they obviously try to apply the same benchmarks to everybody, but people will be reporting in different ways, I expect. But I'm not using that as an excuse in any way.
No, but obviously, but then the follow-up question to that is if there is any learnings from other organisations, I'd hope we're doing that, which I'm sure you are already. But yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Because there is a bit. I mean, in terms of the Green Book, again, not to egg it based on that point. I mean, obviously we're in the top 4. Whereas you say Surrey's at the bottom, but then when you look at Surrey, take them as an example, the number of shifts lost, they're right up there in the top 4. So it seems to be, there's a big variable there, isn't there? Perhaps we might want to think about Green Book staff. I think looking at that.
Surrey a county service? Or?
I think they are.
Because some of their staff will, some of their staff will just be county council officers, so that's probably where.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, they have less sickness. I'm just thinking if they're on Green Book, our Green Book quite high, aren't they? I mean, it's obviously we'll be looking into this, but it's just something to note, I suppose.
I think as well as I've mentioned, quite a bit of Green Book absence this year has been long-term in nature as well.
Right. Okay. Is that fine, colleagues? Can we the recommendations just to know the report? Thank you very much, Tracy. Very good report. Thank you. Move on to next item 5, which is the workforce plan. That's Candida.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is another report for noting, and this is the report, whereas ordinarily we're quite often looking a bit backwards or at the present, this is the report where the service looks at the future. So it's useful for us because predictions based on our understanding and knowledge of what's already happened, of what our workforce needs will be going forward over the next couple of years, and the beginnings of our plans around how we will meet those needs. Its purpose is essentially to forecast some of the key things that affect us, and we've already talked about some of those already. So workforce reductions, workforce increases, the need for succession planning, particular areas of concern within the service, and resourcing requirements are all sought to be forecast through this report. Now, the first bits of the report are the review, and I don't intend to work through those because essentially some of the things that we've just talked about in the earlier report are covered in those. But I would just highlight at 2.4 that point around the preparations for recruitment, because that is so key to us with us currently operating under establishment on the whole time. And indeed the ongoing issue that is a national one of ensuring that there is that we have on-call provision. So looking forward from about 2.23 to the workforce plan for the next 2 years, we've made the assumption, and I think I alluded to this earlier, around the figure that is our full-time establishment. So in our planning for the next 2 years, we are planning to maintain that figure, or assuming that the figure of 431 for our whole-time establishment will remain the same. And at 2.28, you'll see that we mentioned there the provision of full-time cover going forward at Ashfield Station, and that will be brought, a report on that will be brought to full fire authority in the next few weeks. And I think that's probably the key area that will be of concern to members, to make sure that those recommendations that came through full fire authority are being addressed and that we are planning forward for them. Similarly, there is work going on around ensuring that we're able to meet the needs going forward around on-call, which is an ongoing, never-ending national issue to maintain and continue to recruit figures of people within on-call provision. And there is a for members that are new to the committee, there is a fundamental question around the model that is the on-call model, and it's, for us, it's an issue. There are some services for whom it is a greater issue because they have a greater proportion of on-call stations. But it's to do with essentially the different working patterns that people have nowadays compared with when on-call was first established as a model for delivery of the service. At 2.33, just to highlight the work that will be coming forward through committee, some of which will come to full fire authority, but some of the detail of which will probably come through HR committee, which is around the Futures 25 efficiency programme. You'll recall that in the last year, the first phase of the Futures 25 programme was focused on helping us create a sustainable budget position. But as we go forward, it will be much more of a change programme that looks at our models of delivery across the service and make sure that we're fit for purpose, efficient and sustainable going forward. And there will be some work streams that will come here for greater clarity as we get into that. At 2.36, we make mention of the diversity of our workforce. We know that this is an ongoing issue for the sector and one that we are extremely cognizant of and continue to develop ways in which we can try and diversify our workforce. We're focusing this year on working much more closely with our communities. We have a priority that is around understanding our communities better in order that we're able to then engage with them better with a two-pronged or a multiple benefit from that, I guess, which is that by working with our communities, we can promote ourselves as an employer of choice, ensuring that the community is more aware of the kind of range of different roles that there are within a fire service. And then alongside that, ensure that we are meeting the needs of the community better and supporting the prevention agenda. And I know that in recent weeks, Councillor Ifiadora has been meeting with colleagues to look at a plan of action, and that might be something, Chair, that you would like to hear about. So I think, in essence, those are the key elements that are here within the report. Obviously, it is a very lengthy appendix here, and Tracy is the technical expert who has done all the in-depth work with all the detail here that sets out our plans for the forthcoming period. And it may be that there's some questions around some of that detail too.
Okay, thank you. Gul, John's coming for you from page.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's page 21 about recruiting, and from 2.3 to 2.6, the service undertook a whole-time recruitment campaign.
Sorry, two what? Sorry, what did you call?
From the top,
Okay.
2.3 to
Okay.
2.6.
Okay, thank you.
Four paragraph, yeah?
Okay.
What they're saying here, they had a campaign during 2022 and 2023 and 4. They are having a campaign to appoint the 26 new firefighters apprentice during all this time, and from this year, from April to September. I want to know, do you have any statement that you get any of the apprentices or trainees from the BAME communities?
Yes, we do, and you will see that in the report. I'll try and, Tracy might know it off the top of her head, but I think it is outlined in detail at one point that gives the figures that we secured from our last campaign. From memory, I'm going to struggle actually from memory.
It was in the minutes you passed.
That's
We've
right.
got
I knew
part-time recruitment.
That's right. I knew I'd read it this morning. So if I can refer you, Councillor, to page 6 of the minutes, number 24. From the last meeting, it outlines the detail. And I think the key point would be at item F there. So 18 of the 29 appointments who were made in that cohort and were involved in positive action were successful. So this and the bit before that outlines around the BAME candidates from a BAME background. So essentially what it tells us is that where we put time and effort into positive action in our communities and secure applicants, those applicants are more successful. So the work that we do helps people to secure roles with us, that we can demonstrate that. And the bit that we want to focus on perhaps going forward is ensuring that the number of people who actually apply from BAME backgrounds or from more diverse backgrounds and with protected characteristics, that they actually reach the point of applying. So those numbers are still not as high as we would want them to be.
Thank you.
Can I continue from there? Yeah. That's why in fact, I'm working with Matt and Gununda to go more into the communities, because the more we go into the communities, the more we create awareness about fire authority, and that will get people interested in things about fire authority. So I tried to, in fact, we had a meeting, and there was Windrush yesterday, so I gave details where to, and spoke to somebody there where even if they want to make a speech, they can make a speech there, and they can have a table there as well. And there's one coming up again this weekend, Filipinos. They always have, last time they had 4,000 people there, so they're hoping to have 6,000 this weekend. So I spoke to Matt, so somebody will be going there as well too. So if we can be getting into communities and event in different wards, that will help us a lot in advertising it. From there, and having a table and speaking to in the event will enhance what we are looking for. So with that, that should be able to improve this time around, because we are going to have early recruitment next year. So with that can make a lot of people from going into communities, can make a lot of people to get interested, be aware of what is going on, and from there, I guess we should have more candidates applying this time around than before.
Thanks, Candida.
Yeah, we this year, as part of our service delivery teams, all of the whole time watches are looking to befriend within our community and work with a community organisation or a community group. And that will help at very grassroots level build those relationships. And I think this will strengthen our approach because it's more mass than a small EDI team who are only able to get so much reach. And so I think we are beginning to build a more systematic or systemic approach to addressing this issue. We're also looking at how we profile communities with a view to ensuring that we address social deprivation within this as well when we're looking at being inclusive. So that's another strand, because those multiple deprivations are often cut across different parts of our community. So if we could address that, we probably would look to secure applicants from a wide range of different backgrounds. And we are a key sponsor at Pride this year in Nottingham, and we'll be focusing the work that we do on that day on recruitment, so that we will be talking within the community on the Pride Parade around recruitment as our key focus.
Yeah, that's very good, because LGBT is very low. Looking at it there, so that's very good. If we're sponsoring it this year, that would be good.
Yeah, we're trying to be quite focused and targeted around the work that we do, so that we're hopefully a bit faster pace, reaching a place where our workforce is more diverse.
Any more questions? Tom?
Yeah, I'm going to say the same thing I say every time when we come to this. So it's not going to be a surprise, but Gul's very predictable, and I'm going to be very predictable as well. While the city might have their maybe underrepresented spots compared to our workforce based on the demographic, I'm sure Robert won't mind me speaking on his behalf as well. If you look at Ashfield and Mansfield, you know, there isn't much ethnic diversity, but certainly the biggest difference between our workforce and the populations we represent is more socio-economic. And I know I've said it before, but I really want to make sure it's on the agenda. And I know you're doing stuff already. I want to be added by that since we started raising it. But there is obviously a noticeable difference between the number of fire service officers we have, for example, living in the nice estates. So I'm talking about on-call particularly here, but full-time is also a thing. And it's obviously representative of the job itself. But actually, how are we making an effort to get into some of the long-term unemployed communities, which actually something like a job in the fire service would not only change their life, but actually give us some understanding in the service about they're the ones that tend to be the hoarders, as an example. So we do our spring clean service at Ashfield District Council. We began doing that in 2018. I kid you not, there was probably as many settees that we picked up per person in places like the Leamington Estate and Carsick Estate as actually the people living there. There were loads, and people had hoarded them in the sheds and various things. So actually helping people understand that yes, there might not be a practical way of getting rid of it, but do you think hoarding it in a shed that's attached to your house is a sensible fire risk, and things like that, that I'd hope actually we could have as almost an added benefit to employing some of these parts of the community. And that's my only concern in reports like this, and I appreciate that it's less it's not as easy to measure as other things, because it's not necessarily something you tick on a form or whatever, but how we get into those communities and advertise some of our opportunities within them is something that I'd always be very keen for you to push in the same way that you do it for LGBT and ethnic communities in the city.
Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, just to say, I think we are going to be looking at the most at the lower super output areas that are the most deprived across the county. And certainly, I've looked at this information myself this week, and certainly there are some patches in the areas you're talking about that fit within that criteria. And so, almost immediately, then they become part of our target. And I appreciate what you're saying about BAME, but within all communities there will be other protected characteristics that will be as prevalent. So there will be 50% women in those areas. There will, so there are reasons alongside the social and economic factors for us to pay some attention to those areas, and I think I can say that to you as some reassurance.
That's good. I mean, only make one suggestion, which I suppose I may as well make to you now, but we're having a big Ashfield Day. I won't call it the Ashfield Show, I'll always be honest with people with that. But if you look at the Ashfield Day, which the idea of that is to put on a big day for people who maybe don't have the ability to go and afford things separately. We have massive screens, we're putting on big cinemas. Could the fire service provide a video or something that we could play on those big screens? Would they want to have a stand there? You know, things like that, where they actually, everybody we're talking about potentially wanting to appeal to, let's sell it to them. That's where kids literally walk there, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, all walking around. Let's sell them what an opportunity in the fire service looks like.
Yeah.
So that would be a really great opportunity if you could. That's in the summer, so we've got a bit of time to plan for that.
Thanks. John's come in. Patience.
Yeah. What I was going to say, that was what I discussed with Matt and Gununda. Please, that would be good. I was going to speak to councillors here. And if you have event or something in your ward, can you please let Matt, the engagement officer, Gununda, to know about it so that the fire authority will be represented there.
Yeah, I mean, look, these numbers might not sound big to you guys in the city, but we expect 20,000 people to be there. We had 15,000 there last year, and we only anticipated 6. So this year we're anticipating 20. So there's going to be a lot of people, all from Sutton and Kirkby. So
okay, please let's have the date. Yeah, please let's know the date when the time comes, please.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that this week.
I think that's a fair point from Councillor Hollis. I mean, because we look at these stats, it'd be interesting to see the population stats, because I know from my day job in education, for example, Nottingham's a very diverse city, which I represent, but actually Nottinghamshire is, in terms of racial profile and background, it's one of the least diverse. But in terms of when we look at measures, and I think I mentioned elsewhere, we look at within the Equality Act protected characteristics, but we don't look at socio-economic background. So that is actually a point in terms of you're saying who we actually connect to and which communities, which would connect to a lot of people. So I do think that's a valid point, actually, certainly from the areas you're representing that we should look at. The only thing that comes to me from here, and Candida mentioned it briefly, is looking at recruitment statistics on F. And the largest group we've got, it's not minority groups, it's a majority group, are women, and in terms of female recruits, we're down a bit, 31%, and obviously I know as a force we've got issues possibly around that, so I'm thinking that's to me quite a large issue. Are we attracting enough women to apply for the roles, and what type of roles are women going into? I mean, I know you know better than me, Candy.
Yeah, so the numbers we have got in this cohort that are currently training or about to start training are significantly better than in the past. So we are making progress here. It is when you just stand outside those figures and look in, they still look not where we would want them to be. And I think I would just reiterate that point, that what we know is of the 384 applicants for that whole-time trainee course, 50 were women. Of those 50, many of them did very well because they'd worked with us in advance of applying. But what we need to do is get to a point where of 384, 190 of them are women. And it's that is some of the work that we need to be focusing on at the moment, to look at how do we attract and help applicants way in advance, not necessarily just a few weeks before we go out to recruitment, but many years in advance, so that they have it in their heads that working in the fire service is something that they might want to do. And I think as well some emphasis and narrative that is stronger around the diverse range of roles that there are within the service is something that is quite important as well. And I think we run very attractive campaigns around recruitment that are firefighting roles. But those are the roles that are probably most people out there will identify and understand what they are to some extent. Whereas some of the other opportunities that there are to work with us and have a career in the fire service, perhaps we aren't articulating clearly enough.
No, and I was wondering about that, because when you think, I mean, people do have stereotypes about fire service and firefighters, don't they?
Yes.
That when you say, can you think of a firefighter, people draw a big strapping bloke who's lifted somebody down some stairs. Or, I'm not trying to make it simplistic, but, and I think perhaps, you know, in terms of the public, it's getting people to apply in the first place. Tom was talking about people from low socio-economic backgrounds, you know, Gull was talking about members of the BAME community, but the big one's women, isn't it? Because that's really low, isn't it? 50 out of 300, I'm thinking we're making improvements, but it's no criticism of the others force, but it's still pretty low compared to the population. You'd, as you say, you'd expect another 140, really, wouldn't you? So it's a case of whatever we can do to help educate people, I suppose, generally speaking, encourage women to apply. Patience.
Yeah, we're working on that one too as well, going to Women's Centre and all that. So we're going to go to Women's Centre to at least live. I told Matt and Gununda, the important thing to do is to do a leaflet, get your package ready. So we can, wherever there's any event, and at Women's Centre, there are a lot of activities there. So it's a very good place to go to for women. So you get all kinds of women, they even BAME women, everybody there. So that's what we're planning to do as well.
Okay, thanks. Any more colleagues, comments, colleagues?
No,
Tom?
the only comment on that, really, I suppose it's not really for me to comment on it too much, but you look at the success maybe the nursing profession have had, getting more men interested in the profession, and much of that was done on things like social media, their advertising campaigns, where every time you saw a picture of a colleague or people in action, if you like, it was a man and it was a woman, it was people from different backgrounds. And I thought they were very clever in doing that. Certainly on my own phone, you'd always get, because we've obviously got LinkedIn and stuff, I imagine accounts associated with NHS and things, you were getting advertisements of, do you want to become a nurse or a doctor? You saw about these opportunities, and there was always pictures of men as in those roles. Now, that's obviously the flip side of this conversation. But I wonder what we could learn from that, actually, and I also wonder what we could learn from, I mean, where I'm going this afternoon, women's cricket at Trent Bridge. You know, if you'd have asked me 5 years ago, would I have wanted to have been excited about going to see women's cricket, I don't think anybody would have thought, because it wasn't. But the reality is we didn't know the people, we didn't know anything, but there's not only been a really active campaign in actually saying this, frankly, let's be honest, we've watched women's football recently, it's far better than the men's anyway. But there is as much enjoyment in that sport as there is anything men's, and I like the way things are advertised now, where we see things like, people just pick on the cricket as an example, it doesn't say the Ashes and then women's Ashes, it says men's Ashes, women's Ashes, so it's all very, very well done now and purely intended to put everything on an equal footing. But I wonder what we could learn from that, actually, with the advertising campaigns that and awareness campaigns, actually, is a better way of saying it. Not only getting more women and girls interested in sport, but actually the public bought into it as well, which, if you've turned on the TV and seen the highlights, I mean, Trent Bridge was almost packed, I think, at the start of yesterday, and I'm sure it'll be full again today. So they're the kind of things that clearly other organisations are doing well, and clearly we're doing great. Those numbers of 50, I think, I mean, I've been here a few years now, but that's amazing. But how do we get it better? And that's so I'm just happy to steal other people's ideas as the kind of principle of what I'm saying that. But yeah.
Thanks, Go.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Tom that he's right. But I've seen it in the report that BAME, you know, the community underrepresented, and I want authority to, you know, do more campaign to encourage, you know, male or female to join the authority. And I do, you know, as well in the community. I go to the radios and all that. And I think I request, you know, the authority, if they can do more campaign to encourage people, you know, to join the authority, it would be better. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more points, colleagues? Are we happy to note that with all the information? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for your input. We're on item 6 now. His Majesty, no longer Inspector of the Dublin Fire Rescue Authority, areas of improvement. We've got the report. Is that you, Damien?
I don't.
No,
Tracy.
Tracy. Sorry, Tracy.
No,
My apologies.
No, that's fine. So this is a report that we present to members as one of the outcomes from the last HMI inspection of the service. So there were, I think, 4 areas for improvement that they identified last time, and one of them was around making sure that our staff understand what wellbeing provision is available to them, and there was also an item or a comment really just to say we needed to make sure that people understood what, particularly in terms of critical post-incident support, what was available to people. So that was the comment that was made in the report. So this just really summarises some of the things that we have been doing and that we plan to do to take us forward. So we already have, and I think we've talked about this a number of times, we have quite a good occupational health provision, a good wellbeing provision. I think this was really about people understanding where they could find information out more than anything else. So we have made a very concerted effort to make sure that there is a lot of information on our intranet, that we have a specific wellbeing page, that there's lots of links into either external or internal support that people can follow up. So our comms team are doing a lot of work around that. In trying to make sure that people know where that information is and know where they can get that sort of support. We have also undertaken a review of post-critical incident support. So this is where people or crews particularly attend incidents that maybe involve fatality, or there's a whole range of things actually that actually could end up being quite traumatic for people. We always do have post-incident support in place, and we have had for as long as I can remember really. So this is just taking a review of it and a look at it. So we have done that. We've made some recommendations as to how we can make that perhaps a bit more front-facing, so people know what's available to them. So that's will be working its way through really during the next few months in terms of putting additional support in, making sure that people know what it is, and then making sure when these incidents happen that we're actually following up and we're identifying either teams or individuals who may need some more support. We have also commissioned in the last couple of months an independent employee survey on mental health provision, which is being, we're working with Derby University. It's sort of more of a regional project which we are contributing to. So we've just very recently, in fact this week, had the returns from that, so we will be looking through that just to see what we can do. But there are things in there that we will definitely be taking forward, so things like creation of a new mental health network and mental health advocates sort of within the service who have additional training. They're not counsellors or anything like that. It's peer support, it's people who can be there, and perhaps as well more training for managers to understand the signs of where somebody is perhaps having some difficulties. So those are the sorts of things that we'll be taking forward over the next few months. We have also signed up to a national suicide prevention crisis line, which is actually just being developed. So it is a national initiative, so it's the NFCC and Firefighters Charity who are leading on this. And when it is established, and we have signed up to it, and we are one of the early contributors to this, that will be another facility that's available to staff should they need it. We hope they don't, but clearly it will be there. We've also we have an employee assistance programme, and as I say, we've had that in for some time. So it's making sure that people understand what they can get from that. It is very comprehensive if they want support. So it provides advice. It can provide 24/7 telephone helpline. It can provide advice not only on mental health issues. It also advises on financial issues and family issues, and things that do underpin really why people may be struggling with their mental health. So there's quite a wide range of support through that. And it also actually, one of the latest additions to that this year is called Your Care, and basically it's people's own log really of how they are, and it provides programs of fitness and gives them advice on lifestyle, and will tell you sort of you know, you've got your age and then you've got your you've got your fitness age. So it does things like that. So it will sort of work with individuals to sort of point out where they can make improvements to their lifestyles. And something sort of future-wise, from September we're looking at bringing in a benefit which will allow people to purchase called big ticket items, so quite, you know, electrical and home goods up to a certain amount, and actually then pay for it through salary. So again, it's just a way of helping people a bit during this sort of struggle that some people are having in terms of finances. So just another way. We do a cycle to work scheme already, so people can use that already, and this will just be an extension of that. What else are we doing? So we hope over the next year to get a bit more out onto stations, our occupational health team, just to be a bit more visible, perhaps hold some clinics on stations, and so that people understand what it is that actually is accessible to them. So it's just a quick run through of how we're putting in place actions against the particular AFI, and I would hope that, you know, the amount that we are doing will, when the HMI come back, will reassure them that we are taking these measures.
Thank you. Colleagues and patients?
Yeah, page 217. So you've mentioned a lot of things, but how do you measure the progress? You've mentioned a lot of things that you put in place, but how do you, because it's area of improvement, how do you measure the progress?
Yes.
Is it through the employee feedback or what?
It is, and we do ask a question through the staff survey, which is something that we run every couple of years. We also have an ability now to do, I think they're called pulse surveys, where they're called pulse surveys, and they're sort of like an app, you can build your own, basically build your own survey. So the idea is that over a period of time, not that we want to overuse it, because then people get fed up of keep being surveyed, but actually in key areas we can actually do very quick sort of assessment of where we are, how people think we're doing on certain areas, and I think wellbeing will be one of those. So we will do that sort of through the course of the year, probably before the next staff survey, which I think is next year. So we'll be doing that. Of the mental health survey that we've done, we'll benchmark, so it will have the results that we've just done, and then it will do it again in about 9 months' time to see if we've made any progress. You know, if people feel that, they do know more, they understand what's available to them and things like that. So with the EAP, we do get feedback from them as to usage and how many people are using. It's all confidential, it's not names or anything, it's just numbers of people who are using the different parts of that. So we get information in different ways, and clearly absence is one of the ways that we monitor through the year to see if rates are sort of coming down.
Can I ask a couple of questions? That's all right. In terms of that, do we involve the trade unions? Because I think in terms of staff survey, I'm being cynically, I'm speaking as trade unionists, sometimes people aren't honest when they fill out staff surveys, are they? And also if it's connected to their job and around some of these topics, I'm just wondering if we'd work in partnership with them. I'm not suggesting people always be more frank to the representative, but there might be. And then the other thing I wanted to ask is around, there's a number of things here. I mean, I know suicide prevention is very important. I think at the moment the largest killer of male under 30s themselves, isn't it, in terms of that. And then in terms of our finance and so on, and obviously with the cost of living crisis, that's bringing on a lot of stress. The stress is not just due to pay, but outside people's, people's home life, etc. And how far we can get into that, because sometimes if you just use, I'm not being disparaging, telephone services when people have got real problems, it can be difficult. And there's underlying things. I mean, I know from our work, I looked at the crime figures in Nottingham North, for example, and sexual offences and violence against women and girls is really high, for example. It could be our staff, most of which are unreported. So things like that, you're thinking, well, how are we picking these up? And do employees have a duty to do this? And you think as a blue light service we would, because we'd be thinking, obviously, in the line of duty, people can see terrible things, can't they, I would imagine, in terms of fatalities, injuries, or blame themselves. And also there's traumas from in and outside the workplace. In this case, what we can actually do about it and who we can.
We do have access to counselling for people who need it, and that can include trauma counselling if it's coming out of, as you say, in the back of sort of an incident or an accumulation, which is usually how PTSD shows itself, isn't it? That, you know, it's a tipping point usually. So we do have those facilities, specialist facilities, if we need to use them. We have a peer support team, which is run by one of our watch managers, and there are a number of employees who volunteer to be peer supporters, and they're given specific training. So the idea is that if people perhaps don't want to go to occupational health because they feel it's a step too far, it's not something they feel comfortable with, actually there are peer support advisors who they can contact, so the numbers are on our website, where they can very in complete confidence to speak with a peer, because sometimes what you find is people can talk more easily to somebody who understands what they're feeling than perhaps a person outside the service who doesn't necessarily get it. So, you know, so there are those peer supporters. But, you know, feedback that we've had, I think David will agree from particularly some of the incidents we've attended, is that that's been really helpful. It's not for everybody, but actually it is really helpful for people to have access to that.
Just on that, Chair, just to reiterate, I think the difficulty with mental health and addressing it is different for everybody. Yeah. And what we try to make sure is we've got so many different avenues, and there's still improvements to be made on some of those. I do accept, and it's work that we continue to do through this work stream and across the service. But we have the internal, we have external provision that Tracy's talked about. We've got the Firefighters Charity, which offer fantastic independent support through that charitable basis, and we've also got the representative bodies who provide support to their members as well. So we're just trying to make sure that all of our workforce are aware of all the different avenues that are available, because something that works for me might be very different for one of my colleagues. So it's around providing that support and making sure people understand what they've got access to, I think.
So just to add to that, in terms of something that's going to be brought into the service very quickly, I didn't put it in this report at the time because we will be bringing in a confidential reporting line for employees. So that will be independent. So that may cover things like health issues, but it might cover anything, to be honest. So, you know, if something is of concern to somebody, then that will be another route. So basically that will be an independent company. They will filter them, they will feed them back into the service, and then we will respond to them. So that's another way of getting feedback and understanding what people's concerns are.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Any points, colleagues? No, the recommendation is to note that report. We're happy with it?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have any other business, so I'll close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you very much for your work. Really much appreciated. Thank you.